I buried my husband yesterday, and today his office phone sent me a message. The notification lit up my kitchen table at 7 in the morning, 2 days after Marcus died of a heart attack at his downtown office. I'd watched them close the casket. I'd stood at the graveside while they lowered him into the ground. I'd handed his work phone to the funeral director myself, asking him to return it to Marcus's employer. Yet here it was on my screen. A text from Marcus's number, 3 words and a photo. Look what I found. My name is Beverly, and I'm 59 years old. I've been married to Marcus Holloway for 40 years. We met in college, married young, built a comfortable life together. He was an accountant. I was a nurse. We had no children, couldn't have them, doctors said, but we had each other. That was supposed to be enough. I sat at my kitchen table in my charcoal cardigan and dark dress, the same clothes I'd worn to the funeral yesterday, and stared at the message. My warm, deep brown skin felt cold, despite the morning sun streaming through the window. My short, natural hair needed washing, but I hadn't had the energy. My thin gold ring, the wedding band Marcus had placed on my left hand 40 years ago, felt suddenly heavy. The photo showed our basement, but not the finished part where I did laundry and stored holiday decorations. This was a section I'd never seen, behind what I'd always assumed was just a support wall. In the image, the wall was open, revealing a hidden room, and on the far wall of that room, clearly visible even in the dim photo, was a safe, a large commercial safe. The kind you'd find in a bank vault, not a suburban basement. My hooded eyes struggled to focus on the details. My square face with its soft jawline and soft cheekbones felt frozen in confusion. My straight eyebrows drew together. My convex nose flared as I tried to breathe normally. My thin lips pressed into a line. Who had sent this? Who had Marcus's phone? And more importantly, what the hell was in our basement that I didn't know about? I tried calling the number. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. Marcus's voice, recorded months ago, cheerful and professional. You've reached Marcus Holloway. I'm unavailable right now, but leave a message, and I'll return your call as soon as possible. Hearing his voice made my chest tighten. 2 days. It had been 2 days since I'd heard that voice, for real, since I'd kissed him goodbye as he left for work, Tuesday morning. He'd been dead before lunch. Massive coronary, the ER doctor said. He was gone before the ambulance arrived. I texted back. Who is this? 3 dots appeared immediately, showing someone was typing. Then, you should come see for yourself. The access panel is behind the water heater. Combination to the safe is 0314-1985. Don't tell anyone. Marcus wouldn't want that. March 14th, 1985. Our wedding date. My hand started shaking. This person knew intimate details about our life, but Marcus was dead. I'd seen his body. I'd identified him at the hospital. Unless this was some sick joke, or unless Marcus had told someone about this secret room, this hidden safe, and they were revealing it now that he was gone. I should have called the police. That would have been the rational thing to do. Instead, I walked down to the basement, my heart hammering. The water heater sat in the corner of the utility room, humming quietly. Behind it, I'd never noticed anything unusual. But now, running my hands along the wall, I felt a seam. I pushed, and a section of drywall swung inward on hidden hinges. Beyond was a room about 10 feet square. No windows, a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, already on. And against the far wall, exactly as shown in the photo, was the safe. It was massive, 4 feet tall, 3 feet wide, industrial gray. There was a combination lock and a digital keypad. My fingers trembled as I entered the numbers. 0314-1985. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside were stacks of cash, bundles of $100 bills, rubber-banded and organized in neat rows. I couldn't begin to estimate how much, but it was easily hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe more. Beneath the cash were folders. I pulled out the top one and opened it. Inside were documents, deeds to properties I'd never heard of, in cities I'd never visited: Portland, Oregon, Austin, Texas, Miami, Florida. Each deed listed Marcus Holloway as the owner. Each property was worth substantial money according to the assessment documents included. My legs went weak. I sat down on the concrete floor of this secret room and tried to understand what I was looking at. My husband of 40 years, the man I'd shared a bed with, eaten breakfast with, planned our retirement with. He'd had a completely separate financial life I knew nothing about, properties, cash, all hidden in a room I didn't know existed, behind a wall in my own basement. I pulled out another folder. This one contained life insurance policies, multiple policies, from different companies, each naming me as beneficiary. The amounts made me dizzy. $500,000 from one company, $750,000 from another, $1 million from a third. I knew about one life insurance policy, a modest $100,000 policy, through Marcus's employer. But these were private policies I'd never heard of, with premiums that must have cost thousands per month. The third folder contained something that made my blood run cold. Photographs. Not family photos, not vacation snapshots. These were surveillance photos. Pictures of me, taken over years apparently, based on how I looked in them, how I'd aged. Me leaving the hospital after a shift. Me at the grocery store. Me getting my hair cut. Me having lunch with my friend Denise. The photos were organized by year, going back at least a decade. Someone had been watching me, documenting my life, and that someone had apparently been Marcus. Or had it? I looked at the photos more carefully. They were taken from a distance, with a telephoto lens, professional quality. This wasn't a husband secretly photographing his wife. This was surveillance. But why? And commissioned by whom? My phone buzzed. Another text from Marcus's number. Keep looking, bottom shelf. I reached into the safe and pulled out the last item, a leather-bound journal. The first page was dated January 15th, 2005, 20 years ago. Marcus's handwriting. I recognized it immediately. His distinctive slanted script, the way he looped his lowercase g's. Beverly doesn't know. She can't know. The arrangement is too important, too lucrative. I've been doing this for 10 years now, and she's never suspected. The perfect cover, a devoted wife, a normal marriage, a boring accountant's life. Meanwhile, I'm making money hand over fist, and she's completely oblivious. It's almost too easy. I couldn't breathe. I flipped through the journal, reading entries scattered across 20 years. Each one revealed another layer of a life I hadn't known existed. Marcus wasn't just an accountant, he was a money launderer. He'd been working for a criminal organization. He never named which one, always referred to them as the associates, since before we were married. His accounting firm was a front. His clients were shell companies, offshore accounts, drug money and trafficking profits being cleaned and legitimized. And I was part of the cover, the devoted wife, the nurse with the respectable job, the couple with no children, no complications, no one asking too many questions. I was the alibi, the normalcy that made Marcus invisible to law enforcement. March 3rd, 2010. Beverly asked today why we never take expensive vacations, why I'm always so careful with money. I told her we're saving for retirement. She believed it, of course. She always believes me. Meanwhile, I've got $3 million in the Cayman accounts and another $2 million in real estate. When I retire, I'll tell her we won the lottery or received an inheritance. She'll never need to know the truth. The perfect wife, the perfect fool. The words felt like physical blows. 40 years of marriage, 40 years of what I thought was partnership, honesty, love, and all of it had been a lie. I was a prop, a disguise, a way for Marcus to appear legitimate while he committed federal crimes. My phone buzzed again. Now you understand. But there's more. Check the journal's back cover. Inside pocket. My hands shook as I opened the back cover. There was a hidden pocket I hadn't noticed, containing a single folded piece of paper. I unfolded it carefully. It was a letter, addressed to me, dated 1 week before Marcus died. Beverly, if you're reading this, I'm dead. And if I'm dead, it means the associates finally caught up with me. I've been trying to get out for 5 years. I'm tired of this life, tired of the fear, tired of lying to you. I wanted to tell you the truth, but I was afraid you'd leave me, afraid you'd turn me in, afraid you'd hate me. So I kept quiet, and I kept stealing from them. Small amounts at first, then larger. I've been skimming money and hiding it, planning our escape. The cash in the safe is clean, stolen from criminals, so no one can trace it. The properties are legitimately purchased under my real name. The life insurance policies are paid in full, When I'm gone, it's all yours. Enough to live comfortably for the rest of your life. I know this is a terrible way to find out. I know you'll hate me for deceiving you, but please know that I loved you. Maybe I was never a good husband. Maybe I was a criminal and a coward. But I did love you, in my own broken way. The person who sent you that first message is Gerald Hutchins. He was my attorney, and the only person who knew everything. I told him to reveal this room, after my death. I asked him to give you a few days first, to grieve. I'm sorry, Beverly. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I sat in that secret room, surrounded by stolen money and forged documents and surveillance photos, and I cried, not for Marcus, not for the husband I thought I had. I cried for Beverly, for me, the woman who'd spent 40 years living a lie, the woman who'd worked double shifts at the hospital to help pay bills while her husband had millions hidden away, the woman who'd mourned her inability to have children while her husband probably saw it as a tactical advantage. The woman who'd given her whole life to a man who'd seen her as nothing more than useful camouflage. My phone rang, not a text this time, an actual call from Marcus's number. I answered. Gerald Hutchins? My voice sounded hollow. Mrs. Holloway, I'm sorry we have to meet this way. Marcus was my client for 15 years. He made me promise to contact you after his death, to reveal the safe and its contents. I've been managing his alternate finances for years. You knew he was a criminal. I'm his attorney. I don't get to judge. Gerald's voice was smooth, practiced. What I can tell you is this: Marcus died of natural causes. It really was a heart attack. The associates didn't kill him. He got lucky. He died before they figured out he'd been stealing. But now that he's gone, they're going to start auditing the accounts. Within a month, maybe 2, they'll discover the missing money, and they'll come looking for it. They'll come after me. Probably, which is why I'm calling. Marcus set up an exit strategy. There's a passport in the safe. Should be in a manila envelope on the right side. It's in your name, but it's a different identity. Documentation, background, everything you need. He also set up accounts in Switzerland, under that identity. The properties can be sold. The proceeds transferred. You can disappear. Mrs. Holloway, start over somewhere the associates won't find you. Or I could go to the police. Gerald was quiet for a moment. You could, and you'd probably avoid prison. You didn't know about Marcus's activities, and I can testify to that. But the money would be seized. The properties forfeited. You'd be left with nothing. And the associates would still come after you, because they'd assume you had information, that you knew things. Going to the police won't protect you. It'll just make you poor before you die. That's a hell of a choice. It's the choice. Marcus left you. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, he did love you. He talked about you constantly. He regretted deceiving you, but he was in too deep to get out any other way. If he loved me, he would have told me the truth. Maybe, or maybe he loved you enough to protect you from his world. I can't speak to his motivations. Mrs. Holloway, I can only tell you what he arranged. You have options. Most people in your situation wouldn't. That's something, at least. I hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in that room for another hour, trying to decide who I was now. Was I Beverly Holloway, grieving widow, who would report her dead husband's crimes and accept whatever consequences came? Or was I someone new, someone willing to take stolen money and run, to build a life on the foundation of Marcus's lies? The rational choice was obvious. Turn everything over to the FBI, cooperate fully, clear my name. But the rational choice also meant giving up millions of dollars, spending years as a witness in trials, and possibly still ending up dead when the associates decided I knew too much. The smart choice, the survival choice, was to take the money and run, disappear, become someone new. But that meant accepting Marcus's version of me, the prop, the tool, the useful fool who'd let herself be deceived for 40 years and was now complicit in his crimes. I found the manila envelope Gerald had mentioned. Inside was a passport in the name of Catherine Mills. The photo was me taken secretly. Apparently, because I didn't remember posing for it. But the woman in that photo looked different, hair styled differently. Makeup, she looked like someone who'd made different choices, lived a different life. She looked like someone who could walk away from Beverly Holloway's existence and never look back. I took the journal, the cash, the documents, the passport, and went back upstairs. I made coffee. I sat at my kitchen table and tried to think clearly. Marcus had been dead for 3 days. His employer thought his work phone had been returned to them. Had Gerald somehow intercepted it? The funeral was over. Most of our friends had already sent their condolences and moved on. I had no family left. My parents died years ago. I was an only child. Marcus's family was small and distant. In practical terms, I could disappear, and very few people would notice or care. But what about my life? My job? My house? The patients I'd cared for over 30 years as a nurse? Could I really walk away from all of that, from Beverly Holloway's entire existence, and become Catherine Mills? I spent the day reading the journal cover to cover. Marcus had documented everything. Names, dates, amounts. The scope of his operation was staggering. He'd laundered over $100 million in the past 2 decades. He'd worked with cartels, organized crime families, corrupt politicians. He'd facilitated drug trafficking, human smuggling, weapons sales. His accounting firm had processed blood money and made it legitimate. And I'd lived with him, slept beside him, cooked his meals, listened to him complain about his day. I'd been married to a monster and never suspected, except that wasn't quite true. There had been signs, moments when Marcus was distant, secretive, phone calls he'd take in another room, business trips that seemed excessive, money that appeared and disappeared in ways I didn't quite understand. But I'd trusted him. I'd chosen to believe his explanations rather than question them. Was that innocence or willful blindness? I thought back to specific incidents over the years, like the time, maybe 10 years ago, when I'd answered Marcus's cell phone because he was in the shower. The man on the other end had spoken in rapid Spanish, something about a delivery and a deadline. When I'd told Marcus, he'd said it was a wrong number, but I'd seen the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched. I'd known he was lying, but I'd let it go, because questioning him meant questioning everything, and I wasn't ready for that. Or the time I'd found a receipt in his jacket pocket for a flight to Miami. He'd said he was going to Philadelphia that week for a conference. When I asked about it, he'd laughed it off, said the travel agent had made a mistake. He'd never actually taken that flight, but the receipt was for a round-trip ticket, dated for those specific days. He'd gone to Miami, not Philadelphia, and I'd pretended to believe his excuse. There were dozens of moments like that, small lies that added up to one massive deception, and I'd participated in my own deception by refusing to see what was in front of me. Maybe I'd known on some level that digging deeper would destroy our marriage. Maybe I'd chosen the comfortable lie over the devastating truth that made me complicit, didn't it? Not legally, perhaps, but morally. I'd been willfully blind, and that blindness had enabled Marcus to continue hurting people. The journal also revealed details about his personal life I'd never known. He'd had affairs, multiple affairs over the years, with women he'd met through his criminal contacts. He'd described them in clinical terms. Elena is useful for maintaining the cartel relationship. She thinks I'm leaving my wife for her. I've let her believe that for 3 years now, it keeps her loyal. Or Samantha from the Chicago operation is getting too attached. I'll need to cut ties before she becomes a problem. She knows too much about the money flows. I thought I was the woman Marcus came home to, the wife he chose, but I was just the permanent alibi, while these other women were temporary tools. Every relationship in his life had been transactional, including ours, especially ours. There was also a section about his health. He'd known he was at risk for heart disease. A doctor had told him 2 years ago that his cholesterol was dangerously high, that his blood pressure was off the charts, that he needed to make changes or he'd have a heart attack. Marcus had written, "The doctor wants me to reduce stress." Impossible. The associates are demanding faster turnaround times, and the FBI is getting closer. I can feel the walls closing in. I've started the exit strategy, skimming more aggressively, setting up the offshore accounts for Beverly. If I have a heart attack, before I can tell her everything, Gerald will handle it. She'll hate me, but at least she'll be financially secure. It's the best I can do at this point. So he'd known. He'd known his heart was failing. He'd known he might die suddenly. And instead of coming clean, instead of giving me the chance to leave or turn him in or make my own choices, he just kept planning my future without my input. Even his final act of generosity, leaving me the money, was just another way of controlling me. He'd set up a situation where I'd have to choose between poverty and complicity, and he'd bet I'd choose complicity. He'd bet correctly. That night, I went back to the basement. I photographed everything in the safe. I documented the cash, the properties, the policies. I created a record of Marcus's crimes. Then I sealed that record in an envelope and addressed it to the FBI field office in our city. I wrote a letter explaining everything, what I'd found, when I'd found it, that I'd had no knowledge of Marcus's activities during his life. I made it clear I was a victim, not an accomplice. Then I took the envelope and put it in my desk drawer. I didn't mail it, not yet, because Gerald had been right about one thing: the associates would come looking. And before they did, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I called Gerald back the next morning. "I want to meet, in person. I have questions." We met at a coffee shop in the next town over. Neutral territory. Gerald was in his 60s, gray-haired, expensive suit. He looked like a lawyer. He also looked tired. "Mrs. Holloway, I'm glad you called. Tell me about the associates. Who are they? How dangerous?" Gerald stirred his coffee slowly. Marcus worked primarily with an organization called the Cordero Group. They're a cartel operating out of Mexico, with operations throughout the American Southwest. They're sophisticated, well-funded, and absolutely ruthless. Marcus was useful to them because he was invisible, a boring accountant in a boring city, married to a nurse, no criminal record, no connections to law enforcement. He could move their money without attracting attention. And he stole from them. Over 5 years, yes. He was careful. Small amounts that could be explained as fees or expenses or accounting errors. But it added up. The cash in your basement represents about $2.3 million in skimmed funds, combined with the properties and life insurance. You're looking at close to $8 million total. I felt sick. They'll kill me for that. If they find out you have it, yes. Which is why Marcus's exit plan was so important. Catherine Mills has no connection to Marcus Holloway or Beverly Holloway. The passport is real. Marcus paid a lot of money to have it created through legitimate channels. There's a birth certificate, social security number, credit history, employment records. Catherine Mills exists on paper. All you have to do is become her. And what happens to Beverly Holloway? She grieves her husband and eventually moves away, sells the house, quits her job, relocates to be closer to imaginary family. People do it all the time. No one will think twice. And once you're gone, once you've liquidated everything and transferred the money, Beverly Holloway can simply cease to exist. Stop using the name. Stop accessing those accounts. Catherine Mills takes over completely. That's identity fraud. Gerald gave me a thin smile. Technically, yes, but so is money laundering, conspiracy to commit multiple felonies, and possession of stolen property. At this point, Mrs. Holloway, you're already implicated. The question is whether you want to be a rich criminal or a poor victim. I hated that he was right. I hated that Marcus had put me in this position. I hated that my choice was between prison or exile. How long do I have to disappear? Marcus died 5 days ago. The associates will give it another 2 or 3 weeks out of courtesy. They know he had a wife, and they won't move during the immediate mourning period. But after that, they'll start asking questions. I'd suggest you be gone within a month, 6 weeks maximum. I spent the next week living 2 lives simultaneously. Beverly Holloway went to work, came home, responded to condolence cards. She called the life insurance company about Marcus's employer policy. She met with his lawyer, a different lawyer, not Gerald, about the estate. She played the role of grieving widow perfectly. But secretly, Beverly was dying. I put the house on the market as coming soon. No sign yet, no open houses, just quiet conversations with a realtor about expected prices. I'd started selling off furniture, donating clothes, clearing out 40 years of accumulated life. I told my supervisor at the hospital that I was thinking about retiring early, that Marcus's death had made me reevaluate my priorities. She understood. Everyone understood. Grief did strange things to people. Meanwhile, Catherine Mills was being born. I practiced her signature. I memorized her backstory: single, never married, worked in healthcare administration, relocating for a new job. I bought clothes that Catherine would wear, slightly different from Beverly's style. I changed my hair, started wearing makeup differently. Small changes that added up to a different person. And I liquidated Marcus's hidden assets. Gerald helped with this, working through his network of contacts. The property sold quickly, below market value, but for cash. The money was transferred to Swiss accounts, in Catherine's name. The life insurance policies required waiting periods, but Gerald assured me the money would be accessible within 6 months. I could live comfortably on the cash and property sales until then. 3 weeks after Marcus died, I had my first visit from the associates. I was at home, packing boxes in the bedroom, when the doorbell rang. 2 men stood on my porch. Latino, both in their 30s, dressed casually. They looked like salesmen or contractors, but their eyes were cold. "Mrs. Holloway, we're sorry to disturb you. We worked with your husband. We'd like to pay our respects." I let them in. What choice did I have? They walked through my house slowly, looking at everything. One of them, the taller one with a scar on his chin, paused at the basement door. "Your husband mentioned he did some work from home. Would that be downstairs?" "Yes, his office, but I haven't been able to go down there yet. Too painful." The man nodded sympathetically. "Of course, we understand. We won't disturb you further, but if you need anything, Mrs. Holloway, anything at all, please don't hesitate to contact us." He handed me a business card. No name, just a phone number. After they left, I called Gerald. "They were here. They're looking." "Did they go in the basement?" "No, but they wanted to." "They'll be back. You need to leave. Soon." I accelerated my timeline. The house sold within a week to a cash buyer, probably laundered money, but I was past caring about that irony. I had a massive estate sale, got rid of almost everything. I kept 1 suitcase of clothes, a box of photos I couldn't bear to leave behind, and my wedding ring, that thin gold ring on my left hand, 40 years of lies condensed into a simple band of metal. I should have thrown it away, but I couldn't. It was the last piece of Beverly Holloway I wanted to keep. 4 weeks after Marcus died, I resigned from the hospital. My supervisor cried. My colleagues threw me a small party. They gave me a card signed by everyone on the staff. They told me I'd be missed, and I smiled and thanked them, and felt like a ghost already. 5 weeks after Marcus died, I emptied my bank accounts, closed my credit cards, and disconnected my phone. Beverly Holloway's utilities were turned off. Her mail was forwarded to a P.O. box Gerald was monitoring. Her car was sold. Every trace of her active existence was systematically erased. And then, on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after I'd buried my husband, I loaded 1 suitcase into a rental car, locked the door of my empty house for the last time, and drove away. I didn't look back. Catherine Mills flew to Zurich from Chicago. The flight was long, giving me too much time to think. I sat in coach. First class would have been too memorable, and watched America disappear beneath the clouds. Somewhere down there was the city where I'd lived for 30 years, the hospital where I'd worked, the house where I'd slept beside a stranger for 40 years. All of it was becoming smaller, more distant, less real. By the time we landed in Switzerland, Beverly Holloway felt like someone I'd read about in a book, a character in someone else's story. Customs was the first real test. I handed over Catherine Mills's passport, trying to keep my hands from shaking. The officer barely glanced at it. Purpose of visit? Relocation. I've accepted a position in healthcare administration. Another lie, but it rolled off my tongue easily now. I'd been practicing lies for 6 weeks, or maybe for 40 years, and I just never realized it. She stayed in a hotel for 2 weeks while she found an apartment. The hotel was modest but clean, in a quiet neighborhood near the financial district. I spent my days walking the city, learning the layout, getting comfortable with being Catherine. I practiced ordering food in German, though my accent was terrible. I bought Swiss clothes, Swiss groceries. I opened a bank account with the money Gerald had wired ahead. The banker was professional and incurious. Rich Americans moving money to Switzerland was nothing unusual. The apartment I found was a 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building that had been there since before World War II. Small kitchen, smaller bedroom, a living room with windows overlooking a cobblestone street. It was nothing like the house I'd left behind. No memories here, no ghosts, just clean, empty space waiting to be filled with whatever Catherine Mills decided to become. I furnished it minimally: a bed, a table, 2 chairs. I didn't want possessions. Possessions tied you to places, made you visible, gave you a history. I kept the one suitcase of clothes, wore the same rotation of outfits. I kept my nursing skills sharp by volunteering at a free clinic, but I didn't apply for any licenses or official positions. Catherine Mills was a ghost, and ghosts didn't leave paper trails. The nightmare started after the first month. I'd dream I was back in that basement, opening the safe, but instead of money, I'd find bodies, or I'd dream Marcus was still alive, that he'd faked his death, that he was watching me from somewhere. Or I'd dream the associates had found me, that they were breaking down my door, that I was going to die in this foreign apartment with a false name on my passport. I'd wake up gasping, my square face slick with sweat, my thin lips dry from breathing through my mouth. My hooded eyes would stare at the unfamiliar ceiling, and I'd have to remind myself where I was, who I was supposed to be. Beverly is dead. Marcus is dead. You're Catherine now. You're safe. But safety felt like another lie. Just one more in an endless series. 3 months after arriving in Switzerland, I received a package forwarded through Gerald's network. Inside was a newspaper clipping from my hometown. The headline read, "Local accountant tied to money laundering investigation." The article detailed how Marcus Holloway, who died of a heart attack earlier that year, had been identified as a key figure in a major money laundering operation. Federal investigators had raided his office and home. His widow could not be reached for comment and was believed to have relocated after his death. The investigation was ongoing. Gerald had included a note. "They found his office records, but not the basement safe. You cleaned it out just in time. The associates were arrested 2 weeks ago in a separate operation. You're safe. You made it." I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt nothing. I'd survived. I'd escaped. I was financially secure for the rest of my life. But I'd lost everything that made me who I was. My name, my career, my history. I'd become exactly what Marcus had always seen me: as a prop, a facade, a convenient fiction. I sold the Swiss apartment after a year and moved to Portugal, then to Spain, then to Greece. I kept moving, kept changing, never staying long enough for anyone to know me. I told different stories in different places. Sometimes I was a widow, sometimes I was divorced, sometimes I'd never been married. Each story was as false as the last. But none of them felt more false than the life I'd lived as Beverly Holloway. 5 years after Marcus died, I settled in a small coastal town in southern Italy. I bought a modest house overlooking the sea. I learned Italian. I volunteered at a local clinic, using my nursing skills but not my credentials. Catherine Mills had no nursing license. I made acquaintances but not friends. I existed, but I didn't live. The house was old, needed work. I spent months fixing it myself, painting walls, repairing shutters, tending the wild garden. Physical work helped. When I was sanding floors or pulling weeds, I wasn't thinking about Marcus or the basement or the choices I'd made. I was just a woman fixing a house. The Italian grandmother, next door Signora Russo, would bring me food occasionally. Homemade pasta, fresh bread, tomatoes from her garden. She'd speak rapid Italian that I only half understood, gesturing expressively, smiling with her whole face. She never asked about my past, never pried. In Italy, people understood that everyone had history they'd rather not discuss. I appreciated that discretion more than she could know. I'd sit on my terrace in the evenings, watching the sun set over the Mediterranean, and try to remember what it felt like to be happy. I'd been happy once. I was sure of it. When I was younger, before Marcus, before the lies, I'd been a girl who'd wanted to be a nurse, who'd wanted to help people. I'd achieved that dream, or thought I had. But had any of it been real? Had Beverly Holloway's happiness been genuine? And then one day, sitting on my terrace watching the sunset, I made a decision. I pulled out the wedding ring I'd carried with me through 5 years and a dozen cities, that thin gold ring that represented 40 years of lies. I held it up to the fading light, seeing all the scratches and wear from decades of use. Marcus had placed this ring on my finger and promised to love me. He'd kept the ring on. He'd just broken every other promise. I stood up, walked to the edge of the terrace, and threw the ring as far as I could. It arced through the air and disappeared into the water below. I watched the ripples spread and fade, and for the first time in 5 years, I felt something crack open inside me, not healing, not yet, but the beginning of something, the first breath after being underwater too long. Beverly Holloway died the day she walked into that basement and found Marcus's secrets. Catherine Mills was the ghost I'd been hiding behind. But somewhere between those two false identities was me, the real me, the woman who'd worked hard and loved deeply and been betrayed completely, the woman who'd made terrible choices because she'd been given terrible options, the woman who'd survived. I don't know if I'll ever forgive Marcus for what he did. I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself for taking his stolen money and running. But I know this, I'm 59 years old. I have decades left to live. And I'm not going to spend them being anyone's prop, anyone's cover story, anyone's convenient lie. I'm going to figure out who I actually am. Not Beverly, not Catherine, just me. And maybe that's enough. Yesterday, I received a letter forwarded through Gerald's increasingly complex mail routing system. It was from the FBI. They'd closed the investigation into Marcus Holloway. His associates were in prison. His accounts had been seized, but they'd never found the offshore money, or the properties, or the life insurance. They'd concluded that Marcus had spent it or hidden it somewhere they'd never locate. The letter included a line that made me laugh, a bitter, hollow sound. If you have any information about additional assets or accounts, please contact us immediately. We understand you were unaware of your husband's criminal activities, and you will not be held liable for his actions. They still thought of me as Beverly, the innocent widow who'd known nothing. They had no idea Beverly had become Catherine, that the clueless wife had taken the money and disappeared. They'd probably never know. I'd covered my tracks too well, with Gerald's help and Marcus's planning. I burned the letter in my fireplace and watched it curl into ash. Then I opened my laptop and did something I'd been avoiding for 5 years. I Googled Beverly Holloway. There were old articles about Marcus's case, a few mentions of his widow who'd sold the house and moved away. Someone had posted on a local community forum asking if anyone knew where I'd gone. The responses were variations of "she probably moved to be near family," or "poor thing, probably wanted a fresh start." One person said they'd seen me at the grocery store months after Marcus died, and I'd seemed distant, like I was already gone. They were right. I had been gone. I'd left Beverly behind in that basement, surrounded by stolen money and lies. She'd died there, quietly and completely, and no one had noticed. They'd all been too busy feeling sorry for her to realize she wasn't worth saving. But maybe the woman I'm becoming is, maybe she deserves to live in the light instead of hiding in shadows. Maybe she deserves to use her real skills, her nursing training, her compassion, her strength, instead of pretending to be someone she's not. I called Gerald for the first time in 3 years. We'd maintained contact through encrypted emails, but we hadn't spoken. He sounded older, tired. "Mrs. Holloway, or should I say Miss Mills, I wasn't sure I'd hear from you again. I want to do something. With the money, something that matters." "That's unexpected. Marcus stole it, from criminals who hurt people. I can't give it back to them. They're in prison, and I can't give it to the FBI without exposing myself. But I can use it for something good, something that makes the world slightly less terrible than Marcus left it." Gerald was quiet for a long moment. "What did you have in mind?" "Over the next year, I set up a foundation, anonymous, routed through layers of legal entities that Gerald helped create. The foundation funded healthcare in underserved communities, free clinics, medical supplies, training for nurses in developing countries. It wasn't redemption. Nothing could redeem Marcus's crimes or my complicity, but it was something. It was blood money being turned into something useful. And slowly, carefully, I started to emerge from hiding, not as Beverly. She was truly gone now, not entirely as Catherine either. I kept the name for legal purposes, but I stopped thinking of it as my identity. Instead, I became someone new, someone who'd lived many lives and carried them all, someone who'd been betrayed deeply and had betrayed herself in turn, someone who was learning to exist again, slowly and painfully. I'm 59 years old, or maybe I'm 64 years old now, depending on which exact birth date you use. I've been married and widowed. I've been a nurse and a ghost. I've been rich and poor, and everything between. I've lived in a dozen cities and spoken half a dozen languages. I've been so many people that sometimes I can't remember which one was real. But I know this. I buried my husband yesterday, or 5 years ago. Time moves strangely when you're living a lie, and today, I'm finally starting to bury the woman who buried him. The woman who stood at that graveside and mourned a man who'd never actually existed. The woman who'd believed in a marriage that was nothing but useful camouflage. I'm learning to live with the woman who survived. The one who made hard choices and terrible compromises. The one who took the money and ran, because staying would have meant dying, metaphorically or literally. The one who's trying imperfectly and late to turn something stolen into something good. I don't know if that's enough. I don't know if I'll ever feel clean again, but I'm here. I'm alive. And that's more than Marcus gave me any right to be. The message from his phone was both cruelty and kindness. It destroyed everything I thought I knew. But it also gave me a choice, and I made it. I chose survival over martyrdom, wealth over righteousness, secrecy over truth. I became my husband's final accomplice. And now I'm trying to become something else, something better. Someone who can look in the mirror and see past the thin lips, the hooded eyes, the soft jawline, the square face, see past all the physical markers of Beverly Holloway and find whoever I actually am underneath. I buried my husband yesterday. Today, I'm learning to live